Welcome to our deep dive into Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince. And, even the title of this book, it sounds intense. Like, it's not exactly light reading, is it?
No, not really.
But don't worry, we're here to unpack it all. So we're talking about a 16th century Italian political thinker. And he's giving advice to rulers on how to well gain and maintain power. And let me tell you some of his ideas. They might seem a bit shocking at first.
Yeah, that's what makes it so captivating. Machiavelli, he doesn't sugarcoat anything. He's writing at a time. Really intense political upheaval in Italy, a world of shifting alliances and ambitious rivals, and just constant power struggles. And The Prince, it really reflects that reality.
So imagine you're a new ruler in this chaotic environment. What is the most important thing that you need to know, according to Machiavelli?
Well, he argues that a ruler can't just focus on being loved. He famously says it's better to be feared than loved if you have to choose. But it's important to understand what he means by that. He's not advocating for cruelty for its own sake. It's more about recognizing that in a world where power is constantly contested, a ruler needs to project strength and authority to maintain order.
Right. And he uses some pretty striking historical examples to kind of illustrate this point, like Caesar Borgia, the son of Pope Alexander VI.
Caesar Borgia is a fascinating case study for Machiavelli. He rose to power through a combination of his father's influence, strategic alliances, and let's just say a willingness to use force when necessary. Machiavelli doesn't necessarily condone all of Borgia's actions, but he sees him as a prime example of someone who understood the realities of power and acted accordingly.
So it's not about being a tyrant, but it's about understanding that sometimes you need to make tough decisions to maintain stability.
Exactly. And that leads us to another key Machiavellian principle, deception.
Okay.
He argues that a successful ruler needs to be a master of deception, knowing when to make promises and when to break them. He uses this great analogy of the lion and the fox.
Oh, I love that analogy. Yeah. So a ruler needs to be strong and fierce like a lion to inspire awe, but also cunning and adaptable like a fox to outmaneuver their opponents.
Precisely. It's about understanding that appearances matter. Machiavelli believed that a ruler should project an image of virtue, but not be bound by conventional morality if it hinders their ability to rule effectively. He even points to Ferdinand of Aragon, the King of Spain, as an example of this.
Oh, because Ferdinand was known for his strategic maneuvering and political cunning.
Yes.
Wasn't he? Constantly forging and breaking alliances to kind of achieve his goals.
Yes. And Machiavelli admires this. He sees it as a necessary skill for any ruler who wants to succeed in a world of constant competition.
So we've got fear, deception, and a healthy dose of pragmatism. But what else does Machiavelli consider crucial for maintaining power? He goes beyond just this almost psychological tactics, right?
Absolutely. He also delves into the more practical aspects of ruling. He talks about the importance of fortresses, the need for a strong and loyal army, and the delicate balance between controlling potential rivals and keeping the populace content.
Yeah, I found his ideas about fortresses particularly interesting. And you'd think he'd be all about building these massive walls and fortifications, but he actually presents a more nuanced view.
He does. He even tells this great anecdote about Niccolo Vitelli, who actually tore down the fortresses in his city because he believed that the loyalty of his people was his strongest defense.
So it's not just about physical fortifications, but about cultivating the support of your people. That almost sounds nice.
Well, Machiavelli certainly wouldn't use the word nice, but he does emphasize the importance of having a strong connection with the people you rule. He argues that a ruler's strength comes from the support of their subjects, and that support is earned through a combination of providing for their well-being and inspiring their confidence.
But at the same time, he doesn't shy away from the reality that sometimes force is necessary.
That's right. Machiavelli's world is a dangerous one, and he recognizes that a ruler needs to be prepared to use force when necessary, to maintain order and protect the state.
It's all about finding that delicate balance, isn't it? Between being loved and feared, between strength and cunning, between providing for your people and controlling potential threats.
Exactly. And that brings us to one of the most challenging aspects of Machiavelli's thought, his view of human nature.
Oh, because he's not exactly known for his rosy outlook on humanity, is he?
To put it mildly, no. He believed that human beings are fundamentally self-interested, driven by ambition and a desire for security. And he argues that any successful ruler needs to understand this basic truth about human nature.
So how does this somewhat cynical view of human nature affect the way he advises rulers to behave?
Well, it leads him to believe that a ruler can't simply rely on love or loyalty to maintain their power. They need to create a system that incentivizes obedience and discourages dissent.
So it sounds like he's advocating for a very pragmatic, even manipulative approach to leadership.
He is. Yeah. And that's what makes The Prince such a controversial and fascinating work. It forces us to confront the complexities of power and to ask ourselves some tough questions about the relationship between morality and politics.
Okay, so we've covered Machiavelli's advice on fear, deception, practical matters like fortresses, and his rather bleak view of human nature. What else does he explore in The Prince?
Well, he also delves into the role of fortune, what we might call luck or fate, and how a ruler can navigate its unpredictable nature.
Ooh, that's where we get the famous imagery of fortune as a woman.
You got it. He describes fortune as a powerful force that can both help and hinder a ruler, but he argues that a skilled leader can, to some extent, shape their own destiny by understanding how to anticipate and respond to the whims of fortune.
So it's not about passively accepting whatever fate throws your way, but about being proactive and strategic.
Exactly. And that's where Machiavelli's concept of virtue comes in. It's not just about being virtuous in the traditional sense. It's about having the strength, intelligence, and adaptability to overcome obstacles and achieve your goals, even in the face of adversity. Machiavelli uses this very evocative image of fortune as a woman. He says she's fickle, unpredictable, and favors the young and bold. He even suggests that a ruler must be forceful with her, almost like seducing or dominating fortune, rather than passively waiting for her to smile upon them.
Oh, that's such a powerful image. And it really highlights how Machiavelli sees the relationship between human agency and these forces of fate, that a ruler can't control everything, but they can influence outcomes through their actions and decisions.
Precisely. And he connects this idea of fortune to the need for adaptability. He argues that a ruler needs to be able to adjust their strategies based on the circumstances. Being bold and aggressive might be necessary in one situation, while caution and restraint might be required in another.
So it's like he's saying, read the room and react accordingly. But how does this tie back to the idea of the lion and the fox?
That's a great question. The lion and fox analogy isn't just about having two distinct modes of behavior. It's about recognizing that both strength and cunning are essential qualities for a successful ruler.
Yeah.
And knowing when to employ each one. Sometimes you need to roar and show your teeth, and sometimes you need to be sly and strategic.
So it's not about being one or the other, but about being both, and knowing when each approach is most effective. It's fascinating how Machiavelli weaves together all these different ideas to create this comprehensive guide to power. But I'm curious, how do his ideas play out in practice? Like if you're a ruler trying to put all this into action, what does it actually look like?
Well, Machiavelli doesn't just talk about abstract principles. He gets very specific about how a ruler should go about choosing advisors, managing finances, building armies, and even dealing with conquered territories. He even offers 3 distinct approaches for handling conquered lands.
3 approaches. Okay, tell me more. This sounds like a choose-your-own-adventure for rulers.
Right. He says you can either devastate them completely, go and live among the conquered people yourself, or allow them to live under their own laws, while installing a friendly government that is loyal to you.
Wow, those are some pretty drastically different options. What's the reasoning behind each one?
He argues that devastation, while brutal, might be necessary to prevent future rebellions. It's about eliminating any potential threats from the outset.
That sounds a bit harsh, even for Machiavelli.
It is a very extreme measure, and he acknowledges that. He presents the second option, living among the conquered people, as a way to build trust and address their concerns directly. But he also recognizes that this isn't always feasible, especially if you're ruling a vast territory.
So that's where the third option comes in, setting up a puppet government.
Exactly. It's a way to exert control without having to micromanage everything. It allows you to project power while giving the conquered people a semblance of autonomy.
It's all about finding the most effective way to maintain stability and control, even if it means making some morally ambiguous choices. But with all this talk of power and strategy, it's easy to forget that Machiavelli was also a deeply patriotic man.
Absolutely. He wasn't just writing a cold, detached analysis of power dynamics. The Prince is also, in many ways, a passionate plea for a strong leader to unite Italy and free it from foreign domination. Remember, Italy during Machiavelli's time was divided and vulnerable, constantly under threat from more powerful neighbors.
So there's this underlying sense of urgency and purpose to his writing. He's not just theorizing about power for power's sake. He's trying to find a way to save his country.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that makes The Prince so compelling. It's this blend of hard-nosed realism and idealistic patriotism. Machiavelli wants to see Italy strong and independent, and he's willing to accept, even endorse some pretty unconventional methods to achieve that goal.
It's almost like he's saying, look, the world is a dangerous place. If we want to survive, we need to be smart, strategic, and yes, maybe even a little ruthless.
That's a good way to put it. But it's important to remember that he's not saying that the ends always justify the means. He's simply acknowledging that. In the messy world of politics, there are rarely easy answers or clear-cut moral choices.
He forces us to confront the gray areas, the compromises that leaders sometimes have to make in the pursuit of a greater good.
And that's what makes his work so relevant. Even centuries later, we still struggle with these questions of power, morality, and leadership. How do we reconcile the need for security with the desire for justice? Can a leader be both effective and ethical?
These are big questions, and I think Machiavelli would be the first to admit that there are no easy answers. But by exploring these questions in such a frank and insightful way, he challenges us to think critically about the world around us and the people who hold power.
And to recognize that we all have a role to play in shaping the kind of world we want to live in. We can't just sit back and hope for the best. We need to be engaged, informed, and willing to challenge those in power when necessary.
So, The Prince isn't just a historical artifact. It's a living document that speaks to the challenges we face today.
Absolutely. And one of those challenges is recognizing the seductive nature of power itself. Machiavelli shows us how easily power can corrupt, how the pursuit of power can lead even well-intentioned individuals down a dangerous path.
It's a cautionary tale as much as it is a guide to leadership.
Precisely. And he reminds us that we all have a responsibility to hold those in power accountable, to make sure that power is used for the benefit of the people, not for personal gain.
But how does Machiavelli reconcile this with his view of human nature? Remember, he's not exactly optimistic about our inherent goodness.
That's true, but I think he's also suggesting that human nature isn't fixed or predetermined. We have the capacity for both good and evil, and the choices we make, especially those in positions of power, have a profound impact on the world around us.
So it's not about denying the darker aspects of human nature, but about creating systems and structures that channel our ambitions and desires in a more positive direction.
Exactly. And that's where his ideas about civic virtue come in. He argues that a strong and healthy society requires citizens who are willing to put the common good above their own selfish interests.
It's about cultivating a sense of shared responsibility, of working together to create a society that benefits everyone, not just those at the top.
And that requires education, participation, and a constant vigilance against the corrosive effects of power.
It sounds like Machiavelli, despite his reputation for ruthlessness, is actually advocating for a more just and equitable world.
I think he is. But he's also realistic about the challenges involved. He recognizes that creating a just society requires more than just good intentions. It requires a deep understanding of human nature, a willingness to make tough choices, and a constant commitment to the principles of justice and fairness.
It's about balancing idealism with pragmatism, recognizing that the pursuit of a better world requires both vision and a clear-eyed assessment of the obstacles in our path.
And that's where Machiavelli's insights continue to resonate with us today. We may not agree with all of his methods, but his analysis of power dynamics, his understanding of human nature, and his passionate belief in the possibility of a better world continue to challenge and inspire us.
But what about Machiavelli's famous final chapter? He ends The Prince with this fiery call to action, this plea for someone to rise up and unite Italy. How does that fit into his broader message?
It's a powerful ending, and it speaks to the heart of Machiavelli's concerns. He's not content with just analyzing power. He wants to see it used for a purpose, to achieve something meaningful.
So it's not just about acquiring power for power's sake. It's about using that power to make a difference in the world.
Exactly. And in Machiavelli's case, that meant uniting Italy and restoring it to its former glory. He believed that a strong and unified Italy could be a force for good in the world, a beacon of civilization and culture.
It's a vision that speaks to his deep patriotism and his belief in the power of leadership to shape the course of history.
And it challenges us to think about how we can use our own power and influence to make a positive impact on the world around us. We may not all be princes or rulers, but we all have the ability to make a difference.
So The Prince isn't just a book about power. It's a book about responsibility, about the choices we make, and the impact those choices have on ourselves and others.
And it's a book that continues to provoke and challenge us, forcing us to confront the complexities of power and to grapple with the eternal questions of how to live a good and meaningful life in a world that is often far from perfect.
It's amazing how Machiavelli, weaves together all these really complex ideas, power, morality, human nature, fate, into this compelling and thought-provoking work. It's no wonder that The Prince has remained relevant for centuries.
Yeah, it really is a testament to the power of his insights. And one of the things that makes it so engaging is how he uses these specific historical examples to illustrate his points. He's not just talking about these abstract principles. He's grounding his arguments in real-world events and figures.
Right, like he constantly references figures like Cesar Borgia and Ferdinand of Aragon, who weren't exactly known for their gentle leadership styles. What's Machiavelli's point in highlighting these, let's say, morally ambiguous figures?
Yeah, he's not necessarily holding them up as role models.
Yeah.
But he's using them to demonstrate how the pursuit of power often necessitates difficult choices that may conflict with conventional morality. He's showing us that the world of politics is rarely black and white.
So it's back to that idea of pragmatism. Sometimes you have to do what needs to be done, even if it means getting your hands dirty.
Exactly. And this ties back to his concept of virtue, that combination of strength, cunning, and adaptability. That allows a ruler to navigate the treacherous waters of politics. It's about being able to make tough decisions, to act decisively, and to adapt to changing circumstances.
And sometimes that means doing things that might seem unpalatable or even unethical from a modern perspective. But for Machiavelli, the ultimate goal is the stability and security of the state.
Precisely. He's writing in a time when Italy is fragmented and vulnerable, constantly at risk of being conquered by more powerful neighbors. For him, the survival of the state is paramount, and everything else, including personal morality, is secondary to that goal.
It's a stark worldview, but one that's rooted in the realities of his time. But even with all this emphasis on strategy and cunning, Machiavelli doesn't ignore the role of luck, does he?
No, he doesn't. He dedicates a significant portion of The Prince to discussing the concept of fortune, which he personifies as this powerful and unpredictable woman. He acknowledges that even the most skilled and cunning ruler can be undone by bad luck or unforeseen circumstances.
So it's not just about being smart and strategic. It's also about recognizing that there are some things you just can't control.
Exactly. And that's where adaptability comes in. He argues that a wise ruler needs to be able to recognize the changing tides of fortune and adjust their course accordingly. Sometimes you need to be bold and seize the moment, and sometimes you need to be cautious and wait for a more opportune time. It's about reading the situation and reacting accordingly.
It's almost like surfing. You can't control the waves, but you can learn to ride them.
That's a great analogy. And it speaks to Machiavelli's emphasis on being proactive. He believes that a ruler can't just sit back and wait for things to happen. They need to actively shape their destiny by making smart decisions, anticipating challenges, and being prepared to adapt to whatever fortune throws their way.
So it's a combination of skill, strategy, and yes, a bit of luck. But I think what makes The Prince so enduring is that it goes beyond just providing practical advice for rulers. It forces us to confront some fundamental questions about power, morality, and human nature.
Absolutely. It challenges our assumptions about leadership and makes us think critically about the qualities we value in those who hold power. It asks us to consider whether it's possible to be both a successful leader and a good person.
And does Machiavelli offer any answers to that question?
Well, he doesn't provide any easy answers. He leaves it up to us, the readers, to wrestle with these questions and come to our own conclusions. But in doing so, he elevates The Prince from a simple guide to power into a profound meditation on the human condition.
So after diving deep into Machiavelli's The Prince, what's the one key takeaway you hope our listeners will walk away with?
I think the most important takeaway is that power is a complex and multifaceted phenomenon. It's not inherently good or evil, but it can be used for both noble and nefarious purposes. And it's up to each of us, as citizens and as individuals, to be aware of the dynamics of power, to hold those in power accountable, and to use our own power and influence to create a more just and equitable world.
That's a powerful message, and one that's as relevant today as it was in Machiavelli's time. So for anyone listening who hasn't yet read The Prince, I highly encourage you to pick it up. It's a challenging but rewarding read, one that will stay with you long after you finish the last page.
And even if you've read it before, it's always worth revisiting. Machiavelli's insights are timeless. and his work continues to offer fresh perspectives on the challenges we face today.
Well, thank you for joining me on this deep dive into the world of the prince. It's been a fascinating journey.
The pleasure was all mine.
And for our listeners, keep thinking, keep questioning, and keep diving deep. We'll be back next week with another deep dive into a new and thought-provoking topic. Until then, stay curious.